Well, it's hard to believe, but the college football regular season winding down. Just 2 weeks remain. Auburn has their final home game there at Jordan-Hare Stadium on Saturday as Texas A&M comes to town. Of course, the Tigers took care of business last week against Louisiana Monroe. We will talk that game and also look ahead to the Aggies. Let's go head to head. Welcome in, everybody. Cole Cubelic, Simone Eli joining you to talk all things Auburn football going into the second to last week of the college football regular season. It has kind of flown by in ways, Cole. I feel like there's moments where we feel like it's dragging a little bit, of course, and especially seasons like this when you think about Auburn up and down. Obviously, right now, a little bit of momentum with the big dominant win over Louisiana Monroe. Let's talk briefly about that win. What did you like from the Tigers? Obviously, we know maybe a inferior opponent in the standpoint of it's a Sun Belt opponent, but nonetheless, you like what you see when you have the continuity on offense a little bit there.
But also, I think, Simone, when you have a team that hasn't really proved themselves week in and week out, and you don't know what you're going to get, to be able to go handle your business that way, that's a big plus. They need confidence in any way, shape, form, or fashion if they're going to get one or both of these last two games. So I think that helped give you some of that also. Some younger players got some good reps, and maybe that can help them be guys that contribute here in the last 2 weeks of the season. I like defensively how they're lining different guys up in different places. You saw Keldrick Falk lined up in the zero nose at one point in time. Keyron Crawford and lining up on the football, off the football. Jalen McLeod lining up in different places. I think that you're finding versatility with different guys on that side of the ball, and you're finding different ways to use it. And with most likely a mobile quarterback coming this week, I think that's going to be valuable again.
Coach Freeze mentioned in his press conference on Monday that going into this game, though it's a tougher opponent, he wants to have a similar mentality when it comes to just sticking to what it is that they do best, rather than trying to really scheme so much to the opponent. Of course, there's a part of that and needing to know your personnel, but also just sticking with what they're comfortable with. How important do you think that is going into just a really big opportunity as Auburn looks to pick up a fifth win and then, mess around and maybe see if they can get win number 6 there in the Iron Bowl?
Yeah, I think that you look at what you've been doing well. So as far as taking a similar plan into it, I'm not mad at that at all. You want to do the things that were successful and that worked and that guys are comfortable with. One thing that I didn't like, so from a run game perspective, I don't want to see him go in with the same run plan because I thought Jarquez Hunter was finding a lot of those yards on his own. And you know better than anybody, I'm not just going to give running backs credit if the offensive line's opening up space. But
no doubt.
I mean, he was making cuts at different times. He was running through defenders way too early in the process and finding extra yards. If that's going to be the case against this front, you're not going to get those yards. It's just not going to happen. So while some of the plan, I would love to stay the same. Let's use those receivers down the field, challenge the DBs. I think this is a Texas A&M secondary that's somewhat gettable. We also might not really know how good they are because this D-line's so good. You haven't had a chance to get to know. They haven't been tested a whole lot. So, but I think it's worth the shot if you can buy yourself a little bit of time. So I think that'll take some play action, some move in the pocket, different things like that. You've got to get that defensive line on their heels. You've got to get them thinking. If you can't, then there's not going to be any way Payton Thorne's going to have any time to be able to push the ball down the field. So some of the plan, yeah, I'm great with that. But it can't be the exact plan because there are portions of it that aren't going to work against a defense like Texas A&M's.
When you look at this matchup right now, Texas A&M is in a situation where they have a lot to lose, whereas Auburn is kind of playing. I'm not gonna say they have less to lose, nothing to lose, like to an extent, and I think it's a dangerous situation if you're A&M going into this game where you have an opponent who maybe can go and mess around and win. They're not expected to win. Of course, you go into this game, and if you do pull out a win, everyone's excited naturally. But A&M right now trying to stay atop the SEC standings, you wonder, will they come in a little bit tight? We know how difficult it is to play at Jordan-Hare Stadium, and it's going to be a night game. Do you think all of those kind of factors kind of maybe play to the favor of Auburn a little bit going into this game? Is that why they're only a 2.5-point underdog in this matchup?
Yeah, I was in that stadium calling the game 2 years ago when A&M came in as a much more talented football team. I believe a favorite in that game as well, and Auburn put it on them. I think the defense had a lot to do with that. I think the crowd had a lot to do with that, as you stated. I think the crowd can affect this game in a major way. You've got a younger quarterback that's going to be behind center that hasn't been the starter the entire year. So you can get him off his rhythm. You can force him to not be able to communicate the way that he wants to. Checks could be a little bit more difficult. Communication could be more difficult. That's a win in and of itself right there. That helps your team out. So especially if you can find different ways to stem or move pre-snap, get guys in different places like we talked about before, and you're maybe misidentifying certain players because they're not lined up in the spot you expected, that can be huge for Auburn. Other ways that I think they could find an advantage is, like I said, using the aggressive nature of that defensive line against them. So misdirection, play fakes, reads, RPOs, find ways to make them think. And as soon as a defensive lineman thinks, I believe you buy yourself another second or two in the pocket. But if you don't, and you let them tee off, that second or two that you think you're going to have almost works the other way. And it gets you in a lot of trouble, can get your quarterback killed. So I think there are a lot of reasons for this team to be excited. It doesn't feel like the effort has taken a nosedive. There's a couple of guys actually whose effort I've questioned here around midseason that's gotten a little bit better towards the end of the year. So you love to see that. And you love to see guys who actually want to go out and better themselves and better their team.
Yeah. Now, when you think about the A&M kind of from top to bottom, beginning of the year to where we are today, that week, a couple weeks ago there against South Carolina, I remember looking up, I was doing something in the house and I just looked up and I was like, is that really the score? Obviously they got blown out. I mean, manhandled there against the Gamecocks. What went right for South Carolina into that game? And is that something that you look to as an Auburn fan or Auburn player or Auburn coach and say, okay, what worked well? I know you've watched a lot of football between that game and now. And so I don't want to put you on the spot too much, Cole, but I know, you do analyze all these games. You watch, every single significant snap there throughout the SEC. Is there anything that you can think back to on November 2nd that stood out to you in that game in Columbia?
Yeah, I think the first thing is going to be explosive plays. South Carolina was able to find explosives in that game. They didn't give them up. The other part of that too, Simone, you just got to be honest with yourself, is that South Carolina's defensive line is one of the best in college football, not just the SEC. I mean, they're dominant. They have dominant defensive tackles. They have defensive tackles they can rotate in and out. And obviously two edge defenders that can just be a real problem. And I don't think if South Carolina turned it over, I think they only turned it over once in that game. Which has been a little bit of an issue for them in some other games. But, they went out and put 286 yards up on the ground. A lot of that was quarterback run. And so Payton Thorne has proved, even though he's not 100% right now, he can pull a couple balls down and run and hurt you that way. So it's finding a plan that is going to get those defensive linemen out of position. Point blank, you've got to make them think and get them out of position. Essentially stealing yards is a lot of how South Carolina did it. And Dow Loggins, their offensive coordinator, is fantastic. But there are ways you could do it. There's a formula there. The offensive line's got to hold up. When they are asked to keep a defender off of somebody or out of the pocket or try to get a little bit of movement, that has to happen against this group or else it's going to be a long night.
When Payton Thorne transferred to Auburn, I don't think there definitely was an expectation of, okay, look at these thousands of passing yards that he put up in the Big Ten. That's going to translate. That's going to move. And at times, few and far in between the last couple of years, we're like, wow, this looks really good. And there's been a lot of times where like, this doesn't look good. And he gets yanked as the starter early in the year. Why that happened, is up for debate naturally. But do you think an opportunity like this, and then going into the Iron Bowl, can maybe rewrite what his mark on the Auburn program is for fans? And I think back to like Bo Nix, for instance. Bo Nix didn't have a good time at Auburn, and Auburn fans were frustrated with Bo, and it didn't fit. And then he goes and at Oregon, and he's balls out, and now he's a top draft pick, and he's up for Rookie of the Year. I don't think anyone really expected that. Do you think that this is the type of opportunity for Payton Thorne specifically? You mentioned a minute ago that he can maybe rewrite what this looks like if he's able to work some magic here in the final couple of weeks.
I think it's possible, and he's gotten better. He's been much better taking care of the football. He had the one early against Kentucky that was bad. Doesn't mean he's been perfect on his throws. He's been inaccurate a little bit. He still missed a few, but good enough to allow this Auburn offense to move the football. And the thing that has stuck out to me about his play, Simone, in the last probably 3, maybe 4 games, is he hasn't continued to make the same mistakes in the same game. That wasn't the case early in the season. Early in the season, you'd see him make a bad mistake, throw a bad pick, and it would happen again 2 series later. And you're just thinking, we just did that. How do you go back to that? So I do think he's corrected a lot of his mistakes in game here in the back half of the season. And if you can continue to do that to at some point, eliminate a lot of those mistakes, or at least don't allow for them to be that back-breaking play that we've also seen a couple of times, he's got a chance to right the ship. And you beat A&M Alabama down the stretch to get to a bowl game. I think there's going to be a lot more Auburn fans that have a real appreciation for you than maybe you thought possible a month ago, 2 months ago.
Yeah, you're right. We'll see. We'll see how it pans out. Regardless, this is a big opportunity for Auburn, and it's certainly a ton on the line for Texas A&M. When you think about this game at 6:30, there at Jordan-Hare Stadium on Saturday night. Cole, I think A&M is a 2.5-point favorite as of this recording, which it may be a little closer than people. A&M is a 2.5-point favorite. Yes, maybe it's a little bit not as big of a gap as Auburn fans would have expected. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that line, and then where do you think this one will end up?
I understand why the line is tight, just because this series has been pretty tight, and A&M's actually had more success in Jordan-Hare Stadium. So that defensive line, that defense, the explosive capabilities on offense, the run game on offense, I think are all advantages for Texas A&M. They get great use out of their tight ends. They can formation you to death. Colin Klein does a great job calling plays. So I understand why they're favored, and I find it hard to believe that Auburn's going to win the game. I do think they can keep it close. I think probably not one that gets out of hand from a scoring perspective. You're going to need explosive plays to win it, because I don't see either of these teams putting together 10, 11, 12 play drives over and over and over to find ways to win this game. So I'm going to go 28-24. Texas A&M gets the win.
A little bit closer than what I think. I'm going 28-14. I think Texas A&M certainly wins this game. I don't think it's close in the end, but I do think it's going to be a great atmosphere. I think that Auburn fans, you think about your final home game at night, it does not get any better than Jordan-Hare Stadium when it comes to SEC and really college football in general. So certainly looking forward to watching the game and just seeing all of that. And then we'll see how things shape up in the Iron Bowl. But I think that A&M has a tough team. We talked about the defensive front, and we certainly know that Auburn has struggled when it comes to protecting their quarterback. So we'll see what it looks like, guys. 6:30 kickoff there at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Cole, you mentioned that you're going to be down in Death Valley this weekend.
Yeah, Vanderbilt traveling to LSU, and you just wonder, this is another sort of big picture conversation in college football, Simone, is when we get to where teams like LSU are right now, what's the mentality going to be? What's the mindset going to be?
Yeah.
Plain and simple, who's going to dress out? I thought we're going to have guys that just decide not to play. Because last week there was still a pass at them to get the SEC championship game. You could win that, as we discussed, and go to the college football playoff. You don't have that now. Yeah. You're out of the playoff. You're out of the SEC championship game mix. So you just wonder where the mentality of that team is going to be. Yeah. Vanderbilt, I think, is still on the rise. I think they've already exceeded expectations. They want to go back. I think 1951 was the last time they beat Alabama and LSU in the same season. So this is a team that's, they're submitting themselves as one of the greatest Vanderbilt teams of all time.
Certainly.
They've got LSU and Tennessee left. If you can find a way to probably just get one of those, but if you were to get both of them, I don't know of many other Vanderbilt teams that we're going to automatically be thrown ahead of this one.
Yeah. Amen to that. There's no question. We will see how it shapes up on Saturday, and then going into the final week of the college football regular season. Cannot wait, Cole. We know that you will keep us locked down here on Head to Head and the SEC Network as well, guys. Looking forward to this one on the Plains at 6:30 kickoff. For Cole, I'm Simone, and we will see you next week.
Brought to you by Alabama Beef Farmers and Ranchers.